So thank you everybody so much for being here. Again, I'm Christy Calahan, and this is definitely a passion of mine to be teaching yoga teachers how to teach size inclusive yoga. Obviously, I'm really more covering plus size inclusive yoga. And and all its nuances. So let me move on. So, very, very briefly, Lizzie gave my story already. And so just to clarify what straight size means, just non-plus size, somebody living in a smaller body. So that's what that term means, if you were confused by that. So I first tried yoga as a plus size person back in 2002, and was just really hate. I couldn't do anything, understand why, and it was very frustrating and disheartening. So I swore it off. I tried it on a video, and then, fast forward, I got divorced and lost a lot of weight, and became very athletic, tried yoga again and loved it, and just became obsessed with it, became a teacher in 2010, like she said. And then again, fast forward, to just a few years ago, had an injury, gained a lot of weight. And so I didn't know how to do yoga in this body, in this bigger body. And so I started to try to go to yoga studios, beginner classes, to try to know how to use props and, just get help. I had really had a hard time. And most of the time I was, I hate to use the word ignored because it's so intentional, right? But usually teachers did not help me if I was struggling. It was a very, very disheartening experience. And I started to think, okay, yoga is just not for bigger bodies, because this is not working. No matter where I go to try to learn, nobody's helping, I don't know what to do. So I thought I was done with yoga. And then I realized, like, no, this isn't right. So I set out to initially create this library of like modified poses, and then it's evolved from there. And so now I'm very passionate about teaching yoga teachers how to address and help, your larger bodied students in a way that is empowering for them and empowering for you as well. Because if you haven't lived in a larger body, it's really hard to know. I mean, how would you, so why is this important and why is this relevant? It probably goes without saying, but worldwide, there's over 1 billion people that are obese or overweight. But yoga classes are, tend to be filled with slender yogis and yoga teachers. And that's what yoga teacher trainings are really geared toward. Obviously there's some exceptions to that. There have been some more studios popping up and teacher trainings popping up that are including some size education. But on the whole, it's not. It's based on kind of that, I don't want to say standard body type, but I don't really know another way to say that, a slender, able-bodied body. And I've done a lot of polling over the last couple of years, asking plus size students, why aren't you going to yoga? If you want to go, why aren't you going? And it's all because they don't feel safe. They don't feel welcome. It doesn't feel like an environment that they are included in. And a lot of times what I hear from yoga teachers is that they, if they have larger bodied students in their classes, they don't think that there's any issues because nobody's saying anything. And what I want to tell you is that usually there's a lot of trauma that comes with living in a larger body in a world that doesn't necessarily appreciate our bodies. While that might be changing, it's still what it is. And it has been for a very long time. And so usually that will cause somebody to feel like it's all their fault. I suck. My body sucks. I'm not designed for this. So, probably the last thing they're going to do is tell the yoga teacher, like, I need help, because, if they think it's their fault, what can you possibly do as a teacher in their minds to help? That was definitely how I felt. And that's what the students that I polled, that was just really a common theme. So not sharing that. I used to leave some of my yoga classes and I would tell the teacher, thank you, I really appreciate the class, great class. And then I would go in my car and cry. So this is not far-fetched, and I'm sure nobody wants their students to be feeling that way. So teaching accessibly and inclusively, it just means that you're guiding your students in a way that all bodies can find ease in their body and depth in a pose. So what I mean by that is, we all know yoga, not every yoga pose is, or no yoga poses really are designed to be easy. They're active. But when you're fighting with your body, your stomach's in the way, your boobs are in the way, or whatever the case is, you're likely to not have any ease. You're going to be in a upregulated nervous system, actively in fight or flight, more than likely. Think about a time in your life or in your day if you've had a hard time doing something that was physical for your body, and think about kind of the internal kind of frustration or chaos that might ensue, depending on what the situation is. So if you can imagine a larger bodied student trying to do a twist and, their boobs are in the way, or, whatever the case is, and they're frustrated, they can't reach their opposite leg. If it's, in a leverage twist, they can't reach their leg. So they're frustrated. And so there's no ease there. So, we know once we upregulate our nervous system, we enter that fight or flight, we have now, kind of moved out of where we want to be in yoga, which is a calm nervous system, and entered a whole different realm, and almost negating, not completely negating the practice, but it's not good. Nobody wants to be there. And also you can't find depth. So if there's physical barriers that you're struggling with, again, I'll use the example of a twist, and you're trying to reach your leg, you can't reach your leg. It's really hard to get a good deep stretch if there's barriers in the way. So that's really all accessibility. I say all because it's a big deal, but that's really the point of what accessibility and inclusivity is. It's just helping your students to have these things in multiple different ways. Okay, what it is not. It is not, accessibility and inclusivity does not mean the yoga is easy. It doesn't mean it's beginner. You don't need to be pandering to your larger bodied students, congratulating them on, doing a forward fold, something that everybody else is doing, they are a part of the class just like everybody else. We don't want to draw attention to them in any way. You know what that looks like, because you want to make them feel welcome. So sometimes we have a tendency to go over and above, and we want to avoid that because that just makes them feel less welcome. It is not watered down yoga, and it is not just duplicating shapes and creating modifications. So an example of that, I've seen a lot of people trying to create a modification for crow, where somebody's shins are on blocks or a bolster or something like that, and then their hands are on the ground, but there's no active, energetic movement there. There's no mula bandha through the center. There's no engagement, and so it's really just like creating a shape, and that's completely pointless. It's kind of like going to play golf for the first time in your life and feeling like, well, I should be able to get a hole in one, and so I'm just going to pick up the ball and chuck it to the hole, and yay, I got a hole in one, but I've gained nothing other than saying like, I got a hole in one, yay. but, obviously I've gained nothing from that experience. So we don't want to just duplicate a shape. We want to help students to make their body work into the shape that works for them in that, in that moment. So that's a really important distinction. And you might see a lot of shape duplicating, but in my methodology and thought pattern, like that is not what it is. And body size does not tell a story. So a plus size body isn't weak. It's not inflexible necessarily. Okay. So any of these bodies can be any of these things, but a body size doesn't say that they're automatically weak. They're automatically inflexible. They're automatically beginners. They're not automatically out of shape just because they're larger, and they don't need a chair or senior classes due to size. And I added that one because because I'm on a large Facebook group that I'm sure many of you are part of, and there was a question in there about larger bodied students. I can't remember, or it might have been a student themselves asking a question. I don't remember. Anyway, people were giving a lot of suggestions to try chair yoga or senior yoga. And I can't tell you how, as a larger body student that doesn't necessarily need to be seated or need to be in senior classes, how that feels to have that recommended to them simply because of their body size. Any person, no matter their size, can be weak. Any person can be inflexible. They can be a beginner. They can be out of shape. They may need or enjoy chair yoga or senior yoga. So this is a really hard thing to mentally kind of untrain yourself to feel. And I hear this a lot from, yoga teachers, living in smaller bodies, that they just kind of assume these things about plus size people. And that's really important to kind of pull that out of your way of thinking, and recognize that this is not accurate. Okay, so this is kind of one of the biggest aspects of teaching larger body students, and it's something I really don't see addressed. It's obviously, as you gain weight, your adipose tissue gets thicker. That's what fat is, right? It's, your adipose, the little fat cells get bigger. And I say that like, I know that's ridiculous to say it, but I have a point. But like, as that gets thick, like the skin is getting thicker and thicker, obviously, as you're gaining weight. That's why you're getting bigger. So why is this relevant? Obviously, I mean, this is obvious, right? But what happens is that body, that flesh accumulates in different places. So not just the tummy, not just the butt or boobs, not just those more obvious places that you might think, but they accumulate in other places as well. And this is really where the fight ensues for the student, because as that the flesh is thicker in certain parts of the body, or all parts of the body, depending on how they're distributed. Some people are bigger up top, thinner legs or whatever. Some people are big all over, like me. So it really depends. But like when I sit in Sukhasana pose, my thighs and butt, legs, all that fat or that flesh like pools kind of underneath my leg, so my knees kind of sit a little bit higher. And I was in yoga therapy training just a few months ago, and the yoga teacher said, why are your knees so high? Can you push them down? And he was thinking it's a flexibility issue. And I had to explain, like, no, this is fat. Like, the fat is physically blocking the leg from getting any further. So if I start to push down on the knees, it creates a fulcrum where that fat is pooled. So now, instead of, pushing your knees down, if you might be, looking for some flexibility, the fulcrum would be your hip joint, right? But now it's putting this pressure somewhere else, and so the hip joint is, kind of going upwards instead. I don't know the right words for this, the terminology, but it's changing where this where you're feeling things, and it can be quite painful. The same things with arms. So, because I have, thicker flesh right here, when I go to put my arm behind my head, I mean, this is not a flexibility issue necessarily. Now, I am recovering from something called Guillain-Barré, and so I have some weird issues kind of going on right now, but normally I'd probably be able to get it a little higher, but right here is thickened flesh. So this is the same for somebody with large muscles, right? So they may not be able to get that elbow way up high. And so a lot of times what we're told to do is to grab a strap and yank, but your shoulder, shoulder joint is the most flexible joint in your entire body, and is already vulnerable to injury just due to that. Not that we want to be a fear-based teaching, but it's already vulnerable because of its amazing range of motion. So now if I'm yanking on it, this is not a flexibility issue. This is a flesh issue. I'm really increasing my potential to get injured. So this is a really important aspect to teaching larger body students, is understanding kind of where this happens. As we gain weight, we get larger, width-wise, but obviously our limbs don't change. So if we're living in a slimmer body, everything is relative, right? It's all ratios are all pretty relative. So if we, as we get bigger, our arms don't get longer. So all of a sudden now, maybe we can't do binds or, things like that. And it's not a flexibility issue. It is a proportion issue, and a flesh issue. So this is a really, 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 like, I call it the crux, because this really is the struggle. And it's important to understand some of these, and it's very nuanced, very, very nuanced. Okay, so we understand, I got to read this because I don't remember what I said. Once we understand what we're trying to prevent, can't see it because my little thing's in the way. Oh, there we go. Once we understand what it is we're actually preventing, what's preventing depth in the pose, we can assist somebody to work around this. So, but without that knowledge, we're working blindly. So that's just kind of, what I was talking about. Like, once you understand, oh, hey, it's just your tummy in the way of this twist. If you can't figure out why the student is struggling, then how in the world are you going to help them? But if you see, like, oh, it's the tummy, all they have to do is move, lift their tummy up over their leg, and boom, now I've got ease in my body. I'm not fighting. I've got depth in the pose. I can reach a beautiful twist and really get to enjoy it and feel it. So I think once we start to understand this aspect of adipose accumulation and pooling and all that fun stuff, then we are no longer working blindly. We are working with knowledge and education of the body. And then it's, from there, I don't want to say it's simple, but it's a lot easier. Because, what I hear often is yoga teachers saying, I just don't know how to help them. I see my students struggling, but I just don't know how to help. And this bit of information, as you start to learn it, like I use this picture here because I think this is a great example. Now, obviously, if you can't tell what this is, this is a woman sitting, and this is her, well, you can't see what my hands are doing. This is her leg, this is her tummy and boobs and her arm right here. So as you can see, as she sits and brings her leg up, now everything is squishing together, and this is going to create barriers to a lot of different things. It's going to create a block. So this is something I'd like to see people really understand more, because I think it will help. Oh. Okay, so some examples of this are the arms and the flanks. So the flanks are this side stuff over here, and obviously the arms, you know, I've got this fun wavy flesh. That can be really problematic for a lot of things. Eagle arms, you know, that's boobs, of course, as well. A lot of different things, getting your arm behind your back, because now not only do you have this layer, you have this breast tissue on the side as well, the flanks. So as you try to get your arm behind your chest, now you have 2 layers of flesh coming together, and they're squishy. I call them squishy bits. The squishy bits running into each other and just stopping movement. And it's frustrating. It's problematic. A large chest obviously can be really a big block in a lot of different things. You know, the one that always comes to my mind first is eagle arms. Students that have big chests really struggle with eagle arms in the traditional way it's taught. The tummy, you know, as the tummy can be a blocker in a lot of different poses, obviously kind of standing forward fold, and really kind of depending on how the tummy is distributed, because not everybody has a big lower tummy, or, you know, I mean, who knows? It's all very different. And the tummy can block so many different things. Laying on this laying prone can be really uncomfortable for people with a larger tummy. You know, again, forward folds, twisting, anything like that where the tummy is, seriously, my cat, sorry. Anything where the tummy could potentially block a movement, which is a lot of poses in yoga. So that tends to be a big one. Thick legs. So something again like Sukhasana, you know, mountain pose, something is, you know, I hate to say simple, but something like mountain pose can be problematic with large legs, because often it's cued, you know, feet together or feet just fists widths apart or hips widths apart. But that isn't comfortable for a lot of people, because that, you know, if you have thick, fleshy legs, like I do, the bringing the legs together is really, it's not an option. And even just fist widths apart is just not an option. Especially once you start to activate the legs, those squishy bits in the legs and the inner thighs coming together. So now the pressure comes to the knees as you're activating and pulling everything in toward midline, the pressure goes to the knees. So in that example, I just have them walk a little bit further apart. I step further apart so it's comfortable. You know, it doesn't change the pose. So, and of course, a big bottom can be problematic in a couple different ways, depending on what the pose is. So these are just examples within the body, and there's going to be, of course, nuances to all this. And but this pretty much covers the different problem areas. Okay. So inclusive cueing. So in my method and how I suggest people create a more inclusive space is cue the most accessible variation of a pose first. And then you move to cue options and choices for sensation, not shape duplication. So that is a really important little aspect there, that you want to cue your students to be seeking sensation instead of, creating the shape that you're making. Because by giving them the choice to pursue feeling and sensation instead of copying my shape, you're empowering the student to take the option or variation that feels the best for them and their body that day, right? Like, what feels welcome in my body today, might be different than what it was yesterday and what it will be tomorrow. So the example I'll use for this is child's pose. So if you've been on my Instagram page, I have like a thing with child's pose, because child's pose is always taught like this beautiful restful position. And for a lot of bodies, it is anything but restful. It is hell. And that's due to a lot of different issues. But like in a larger body, if if you can't, when you're on your knees and you go to sit back, if you've got large legs, large calves, now all of a sudden, you really can't maybe sit all the way back. So your butt isn't going to come to your heels. And if you try to force it, now the pressure is on the knees. So it can be really challenging there. So the butt might stay higher. So if the butt's staying higher, now all this pressure is going into where? The neck, right? It's going to go straight to the neck. So, and also if you've got a larger tummy, you're trying to rest your tummy on your legs, and that is just awful. It is just so miserable. So what I learned this from Crystal Gray. She taught this beautiful variation of a child's pose that is lovely. So feet stay together, knees stay nice and wide, about the width of the mat or whatever's comfortable. And then you can just wiggle the tummy into that open space. And then you can, stack your fists to rest your widow's peak. You can use a block, you can use a bolster. I like to use a bolster right between lengthwise, because that brings my upper body up to a little bit higher, or about the height of my butt, or maybe a little bit lower. But so I'm not like this and all that pressure is, into my neck. And it's just beautiful. So you cue that variation first, and then you start cueing for if you want more sensation, or if this doesn't feel good, whatever. You can bring the knees together. You can, put your widow's peak on the mat. You can bring your arms to your side, whatever options you want to offer, so that now instead of cueing the traditional pose and then cueing down is kind of what I call it. You start to cue down, like, well, this is too hard, widen your knees, or blah, blah, blah. Because I mean, that feels terrible, right? Oh, okay, well, I guess I have to, take this lesser pose or whatever. So if you go the other direction, you give a lot more room for empowerment and agency, which is, what we want to help students have. And then cue your students to lift. It's called my lift and shift, to lift and shift the body as needed. So lift your boobs out of the way, lift your belly out of the way. If those things are in the way, move them. And students don't usually have even the knowledge to know that they can do this. And, my favorite story is learning how to do this from, again, my teacher, Crystal Gray. And I was taking one of her, it was an online class. And so just as her cueing in a twist, she said, I can't remember if she said, you've got a tummy or whatever, but just lift it, move it over the leg, and just very nonchalant, no big deal. And she's very slim. She's a very athletic figure. And it like blew my mind, because I have a big tummy, and I didn't realize that it was in the way until all of a sudden I was empowered to move it. And it blew my practice wide open. And that was coming from a, smaller bodied student or teacher. So be empowered to know, as a yoga teacher living in a smaller body, you can absolutely cue students. I mean, I wouldn't go over to them and be like, hey, you just cue it in general. Even if you don't have big bodies, what you view as a big body in your class, you don't know what people are struggling with. You have no idea what's underneath, their clothes, right? So just cue it. Just cue, move your tummy if you need to, empower your students, because I promise you, they don't know they can do this. I don't know why we don't know, oh, we can just move our flesh. We're taught as a polite society to kind of do what we're being told. There's a whole FBI statistic about that, but I will not bore you with that. But we're trained to do what we're told. So it doesn't maybe necessarily occur to somebody. And, somebody who'd been trying to figure out yoga in a bigger body for years had no idea to do this. So that was huge. And that will deeply empower your students. We want students have agency, and we want to remind them that they have agency. They don't have to do exactly what you're showing. It's fine for them to take a position that feels good in their body at that moment. And we really want to encourage that and empower that. It's just going to change their practice and potentially change their life. I know it sounds dramatic, but it's true. Okay. Some really small little changes that you can start making today is we want to, instead of telling students what they should be feeling, like, oh, you should be feeling this in your butt or whatever. Probably don't feel that many things in your butt, but you should be feeling this wherever. Instead, we want to invite them to explore what they're feeling. This starts to bring them internal. So a lot of people don't have body awareness, as I'm sure you're very aware of as yoga teachers. So you want to invite them inside into that internal world to notice how they're feeling. Because if they don't know how they're feeling, then they're constantly going to be at war with their body, potentially, because they don't understand necessarily. So we want to invite them to recognize where they're feeling something physically, maybe how it makes them feel. You don't have to go into all that, but just invite them into that deeper inner world. And then we want to try to eliminate like directives in a class. Instead of do this, I mean, not that you'd ever say that as a yoga teacher, but we want to eliminate the directive type of speaking necessarily, and instead say, maybe see how this feels, maybe, try this variation. How does that feel today? And then some, like with props are a really big topic that could be a whole seminar in and of themselves. But we want to stop kind of this narrative that props are there to help you when you can't do something. We want to show props are there to support you. So instead of saying, if you can't reach the ground, get a prop. Instead, we want to demo with props, which can sometimes really be a challenge if you don't use them in your own personal practice, or if you're using your teaching time as a personal practice. This might not feel good to you, but this is something to kind of start thinking about and kind of working on. But utilize and demo with the prop. You don't have to, as a teacher, you don't have to show the most advanced variation of a pose, right? So demo with a prop, show them it's fine to use, so they don't feel like I'm a lesser yogi if I'm using a prop. And then you really want to integrate props into your practice, into your teaching. I mean, which can be hard again, because this isn't necessarily the current culture. So it's something that we can all work on as yoga teachers. So again, we are sensation seekers, not shape duplicators. And that is so important. Okay. Gotta make sure I'm staying on time. Woo, I gotta get through this quick. Geez. Okay, so problematic poses. I'm just giving you a list here and I'll go through them like super quickly because I want to save time for questions. Leverage twists. So anytime, I can't really once in front of this camera. Anytime you're twisting and using an arm across the body to kind of pull, get that leverage, that can be really problematic with the bigger body. Folds, obviously. Oh, thankfully, I've talked about a lot of these things. Forward folds, seated, standing forward folds, eagle arms, child's pose, happy baby, as you can probably imagine, pulling up the knees. And as you pull them up, not only is the tummy there, but now as you tilt your pelvis, you're pushing all that tummy fat more into the middle. So now it's just becoming a bigger issue. Or barrier. I don't want to call it an issue, but a barrier. Hands connecting anywhere on the body, just something to be aware of. Even just crossing your arms as a larger body person can be really difficult and very triggering. So I hear it taught a lot, to reach behind your back and connect your hands, like, nope, can't do it. And then I just feel horrible and embarrassed and ashamed. And, so connecting the hands is not typically thought of as a problematic thing, but it is. It can be very, very triggering for a larger body students. Crow, obviously, because as you bring that body together, into that lift, the tummy is going to kind of, come together more, and it's going to be difficult. So, seated poses, fire logs, easy, easy seated pose, and cow face is the one that makes me the most upset. Big legs, nope, really frustrating. Now, problematic doesn't mean you don't do it, just so you know. I mean, like, there are ways to do all of this in a larger body. I just don't have time to go over them. I'm just kind of trying to give an example for you all. Stepping through to downward dog could be really challenging. You've got tummy again, all kind of hanging and pulling. So there's really not a lot of room for the legs or the leg to step through. Okay, an easy way, I talked about this. An easy way to really deeply empower your students is teaching them to lift and shift their flesh as needed. I cannot tell you the impact this makes. I'm very fortunate on my Instagram page to have a nice community of yoga teachers that share their experiences if they go try something and then tell me how the students respond to it. It's just such a beautiful thing I get to share with you all. So I've gotten just amazing feedback from teachers when they teach this in class, and usually people giggle, and that's fine. If you say boob or whatever, like, people giggle, and that's good. Laughing and giggling always helps the nervous system. So just don't be afraid of it. Don't be ashamed to talk about tummies and flesh and fat. Like, these are not shameful things. And when we tiptoe around these things, we create or we continue the narrative that they are shameful. You wouldn't say to a student like, oh, since you're short, like, like, no, he'd be like, well, you're short, your arms are short or whatever. So you wouldn't hesitate. So there's no shame. But if I say like, oh, okay, if you have a tummy, and I get all weird about it, it's not something that the student's going to be like, oh yeah, they're just going to be like, oh, but it's matter of fact, flesh is flesh. Some people have a lot, some people don't have much. It's fine. There's no judgment either way. At least there shouldn't be. Oops, did I skip a thing? If not, man, I'm on the money with time. Oh. Okay. Yes.
That's awesome, Chris.
Thank you.
And I think I was watching the chat throughout, and it's amazing to see everyone, being so willing to talk about this and learn and, offering their suggestions as well. So I'll definitely send that over to you so you can
Okay, thank
read
you.
through that as well. So we have about 15 minutes or so, and we'd love if anyone has any questions specific to their not practice or to their practice or to their class. Feel free to chat them in. I'm going to check the question feature to see if any came in there. So let me just read through this. Nicole asks, Christy might cover this later, so she asked quite early, but in case, I'm curious to know how you balance the approach discussed, such as the student needing to move their tummy out of the way versus making someone feel awkward, called out, especially if there aren't a lot of other larger bodied students in class.
Such a good question. I'm really glad you asked that. So I touched on it a little bit, but I don't recommend as a teacher that you go over to your larger body students and offer it. I recommend you just include it in your cueing, regardless of who's in your class. Make it standard. That way people aren't feeling called out. I mean, yeah, they might be like, oh, I'm the only chubby person in, this is for me. You can't control how people receive things, but I mean, more than likely they're not going to feel that way. They're just going to be like, oh, yay, thank you. So yeah, but I do recommend avoiding going up to students or, calling them out specifically to move their tummy out of the way. Just make it part of your standard cueing. That way you're not having to survey the room. Are there any big people in here? Like, no, it's just part of your cueing. So hopefully that answers the question. If not, let me know and I'll clarify.
Thanks, Christy. Another one, and we talked about eagle arms, but Katie asks, I teach eagle arms starting with holding the shoulder heads and stacking your elbows. Is there another modification or notification, stacking arms and reaching for elbows? Does that still give a shoulder stretch? Other suggestions? So she's just looking for is there any other suggestions?
Yeah, definitely. Really, you can even do something as simple as this. I've come to really love this variation where my hands are connected and I'm connecting the elbows the best that I can. And I am definitely feeling that. So yes, I do like this variation that you're talking about. That's one that I really enjoy. But yeah, even literally just connecting the hands here and then getting the elbows as close as they can go. They're going to feel that more than likely. I mean, if somebody has really flexible shoulders, potentially the boobs in the way do create an additional stretch for them because it's, you're forcing over more things, so it's going to stretch the shoulders out even further. So I mean, but you can't get rid of them. Like there's no way to like lift them out of the way and like try to reach under. I've tried, but yeah, try this one. This is a really good one. It's simple, but it's very effective.
Another question came in from Amy. She said, I believe you said easy seated pose is one that can be quite difficult. Can you give an example? Can you give a specific suggestion for that pose?
Well, first of all, you want to make sure that your class descriptions have accessibility notes. So people, you want to be able to tell people, just so you know, this class has getting up and down from the mat. So that way people that cannot get down on the ground aren't being, you aren't having to modify somebody so much that they're not sitting on the ground at all. So just to add that little caveat there. So as long as they can get up and down from the ground, seated pose, it's not necessarily, it depends on the body, but really to make it less uncomfortable, you can just prop the knees up. So for somebody like me, I prop my knees up on the side to help take the pressure off that like flesh. And that's really helpful. Obviously, my legs don't necessarily tuck underneath all the way. So when I'm cueing this, I cue to just bring your legs in as close to the body as they feel comfortable, and then prop the knees up. So it's not necessarily a difficult posture as it can be really uncomfortable. So that's what I use myself. And then that's what I would cue.
Mhm. Thank you. We'll do a couple more, and then I'll kind of give you the floor to tell people how you can connect with you and anything you have upcoming.
Okay.
So Sarah asks, if you're planning on using a chair as a prop and there is a plus sized person and you do not want them to be offended, what would you do?
Well, bringing out a chair, I don't know. I guess I'm trying to I want to understand
Yeah,
the question.
we'll skip that one for now.
Okay.
Someone asked, let me just read the question. How can you Alrighty. So how can forward folds be made more comfortable? I teach yin and restorative quite a bit, which involves longer hold times.
Yeah. Okay. A really easy way to make that a more comfortable position, standing or seated, is to just bring the feet out a little wider, not necessarily into a wide leg forward fold, but just a little bit wider. And then you want to give the added cue to, I use the words wiggle and, wiggle your belly into that open space. If that is too silly of a word for you, you can find another way. If you like to speak more elegantly than I do, to move your belly, your tummy into that open space for expansion, things like that. But that is very, very helpful. But the important thing is to wiggle the flesh in there, depending on their tummy. Because if they just still lay it over the top, there's really not a lot of room for expansion still. Hopefully that.
Yeah, no, that was great.
Okay.
Okay, so the last one, and then we'll move on. Karen asks, can I ask, is plus size the right terminology to use? What is correcting without offending, making anyone feel uncomfortable? As that's the last thing I would want to do. So is there any other terminology, or can we say plus size? And
You
yeah,
can say plus size. I mean, you don't really need to say it necessarily to people. People know that they're living in a larger body. You can use that term, living in a larger body, living in a smaller body, plus size. Yeah, I mean, you don't really, I mean, I can't think of many places. I use those words
Mhm.
frequently because I'm directing what I'm saying to different people, but I wouldn't say in a class, like if you're plus size or if you're living in a larger body, there's really no reason to kind of categorize people in that way in a class. And it's a good question. I get that a lot because people are really afraid of how, offending people. And I totally get that. And just know that you're not alone in that insecurity or that nervousness to address it incorrectly. And hopefully that helps. But yeah, you really don't need to categorize it. But if you do, plus size fine. Living in a larger body is fine. All that is fine. Did I answer the whole question? I feel like there was a
No, I
second
think
part.
yes, you did.
Okay.
I think realistically, right, we don't have to put people in these boxes, and you can kind of address the whole, and people might want to use those suggestions and modifications, or not even modifications, just differences,
Yeah.
even if they're not plus sized or living in
Right.
a larger body. So this
Yeah.
is amazing. Okay, well, I'm going to pass it back to you, Christy. And I
Okay.
know you mentioned you have a potential course coming up. So if you
Mhm.
want to just feature that a little bit and see
Okay.
how people could stay involved with you to potentially look into that further.
Okay. Thank you, Lizzie. And to the person that asked the question about the chair, if you want to reach out to me on Instagram and message me, I'll answer that question. I'll just need a little clarification. But I am on Instagram. Chubby Lotus Yoga is where you can find me. And You can also email me at christy@chubbylotus.com. So I have a in September is the kind of time frame I'm looking at right now for launching a course. It's a certification course to certify you as like a size inclusive yoga teacher. And it's not a YTT, it's just like a continuing education type thing. But so that's coming up in September, and I'm taking limited people. So you're definitely going to want to get on my email list, which I don't know, Lizzie, I have a workbook.
Yeah, let me
Probably
grab
go
that.
out in the email, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So in the email you guys will get tomorrow, you'll get a link for a workbook where I kind of, summarize this even, briefer, but and I put that in there so you guys can get on my email list so you can kind of stay in the loop of what's going on. But my course is very, very holistic. So it doesn't just, teach you how to cue and blah, blah, blah. It really teaches you a holistic approach that works, it covers the yoga teacher and the yoga student as well. So that'll be coming in September, and I'm really freaking excited about it. I've been working on it for a long, long time.
Everyone, I just put that in the chat, so you can definitely check that out, and we will send out the recording and all of the information in the email as well. Christy, I have one more question, and I got a few people asking me about Yoga Alliance hours and things like that. Could you elaborate potentially on if this could be used as a continued education hour?
Definitely. I think it would, be the hour, it'd be a contact hour, which we can still use until the end of December. Yay. So yes, if you want to email me at Christy@chubbylotus.com, give me your Yoga Alliance name, however you're registered on Yoga Alliance, and then give me a brief like summary or 3 points to this that you got, something, so I can say like, okay, yeah. And then I'll send you a certificate, and then you can get that hour from Yoga Alliance.
Amazing. And I'll include that information as well in the email if people want to reach out to you directly. Alrighty. Well, thank you, Christy. I think this is a wonderful topic, and I think a long overdue topic for the beYogi webinar series. So I appreciate you coming on, and we will get this recording out to everyone tomorrow. Alrighty.
Okay. Thank you so much for letting me share. It was wonderful, and thank you all for being here.
Of course. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.